Growing up in the Victorian Age feels like a puzzle at first because it was an era that praised childhood innocence while quietly surrounding young lives with strict rules, heavy expectations, and streets that never truly slept. How could a time famous for lace curtains, afternoon tea, and polite manners also be an age where children learned discipline earlier than joy and responsibility earlier than freedom? That question follows us as we step into crowded cities, where factories hummed endlessly and homes stood shoulder to shoulder, promising opportunity while quietly demanding endurance from even the youngest residents. The Victorian world expanded with confidence, driven by machines, trade, and empire, yet it often measured progress by order rather than comfort, a habit that shaped how children were raised. To grow up then meant learning where you belonged, not just in your family, but in a carefully ranked society that noticed class before character. As our journey begins, the tension appears clearly because protection and control walked hand in hand, and it was rarely obvious which one was leading. Children born into wealth experienced childhood as preparation, where manners, lessons, and posture mattered almost as much as happiness. Large houses echoed with scheduled routines. From lessons with tutors to supervised play, each moment guided by adults determined to mold future gentlemen and ladies. Books, music, and conversation filled these rooms, yet spontaneity was often gently discouraged since obedience signaled good breeding. Clothing itself reinforced expectations, wrapping young bodies in tight collars and layers that reminded them to behave properly at all times. Meanwhile, across town, childhood unfolded very differently for families without wealth, where survival shaped daily routines more strongly than etiquette ever could. Working-class children learned quickly how valuable their small hands and quick movements could be, even before they fully understood why work mattered so much. Homes in these neighborhoods were often crowded and noisy, creating early independence but leaving little space for privacy or rest. Schooling existed, but it competed constantly with labor since education promised future improvement while work solved immediate hunger. Families balanced hope and necessity each morning, deciding whether books or wages would guide the day. The storyteller notices how these choices were not careless, but calculated within limits few outsiders fully appreciated. Religion played a powerful role, shaping ideas of duty, morality, and discipline that framed childhood as a time for correction rather than exploration. Churches, sermons, and Sunday schools reinforced lessons about obedience, patience, and endurance, values thought essential for both social order and personal salvation. For many children, these teachings provided comfort and community, even while reinforcing strict behavioral expectations. The city itself became a silent teacher, with crowded streets offering constant lessons about danger, speed, and awareness. Children navigated traffic, marketplaces, and strangers daily, developing practical intelligence long before adulthood officially arrived. Play existed, but it unfolded creatively between responsibilities, using imagination more than toys. Public attitudes toward children reflected contradictions, since society celebrated innocence while demanding usefulness. Newspapers praised reform while advertising jobs suitable for the young. Progress and restraint pulled in opposite directions, leaving childhood stretched between ideal and reality. Health and safety posed constant challenges as pollution, disease, and poor sanitation affected young bodies with particular force. Families understood illness as an ever-present risk, shaping habits around caution rather than comfort. Medical knowledge improved gradually, yet prevention often depended on discipline rather than treatment. Rules governed nearly everything, from posture to speech, reinforcing the idea that character could be trained through structure. Punishment, though varying widely, remained a common tool for teaching lessons believed necessary for survival in a demanding world. The storyteller gently observes that love and strictness were often tangled together, inseparable in daily practice. Books and stories mirrored these beliefs, offering moral tales where good behavior earned rewards and missteps led to correction. Such stories entertained, but they also instructed, quietly shaping expectations about consequence and responsibility. Children learned not just to read words, but to read society itself. As industries grew and cities swelled, childhood became increasingly visible as a social concern rather than a private family matter. Debates emerged about education, labor, and welfare, even while everyday routines continued unchanged for many families. This slow shift planted questions that had not yet found clear answers. By the end of this early journey through the Victorian world, childhood appears less like a single experience and more like a collection of pathways shaped by class, belief, and circumstance. The age created foundations of structure and ambition that would echo for generations. And just beyond this point, those foundations would begin to crack as voices grew louder and expectations quietly started to change. As the Victorian Age moved forward, the quiet questions planted earlier began to surface in public conversations where newspapers, reformers, and families alike started noticing that childhood shaped the future more powerfully than factories or railways ever could. The idea slowly emerged that children were not merely small adults in training, but developing individuals whose bodies, minds, and emotions required protection as well as guidance. Factories, schools, and homes became connected parts of one system because the same child might move between them daily, carrying lessons learned in one space into another. Reformers observed working conditions carefully, recording long hours, dangerous machines, and exhaustion, not to shock audiences, but to explain how early strain followed children into adulthood. These observations transformed concern into pressure, urging governments to consider limits where none had existed before. Education expanded unevenly, yet its presence alone changed expectations, since reading and writing opened doors to ideas beyond immediate surroundings. Classrooms introduced structures similar to factories, with bells, schedules, and discipline, but they also offered something rare, which was time devoted to learning rather than earning. Teachers balanced instruction with moral training. Believing knowledge without character could be risky in a rapidly changing society. Families responded differently to these changes because rules that helped one household survive could harm another struggling to feed everyone. Parents weighed tradition against reform, often choosing what kept their children safest in the moment, even if it limited future opportunities. The storyteller notices how love expressed itself through difficult decisions rather than gentle words alone. Leisure slowly gained recognition as valuable, not wasteful, especially when doctors linked rest and play to healthier development. Parks, museums, and public spaces opened their gates, offering children places to explore that were supervised but less restrictive than workrooms or parlors. Such spaces hinted at a new balance between order and freedom. Literature for young readers shifted tone, blending instruction with imagination, allowing curiosity to coexist with lessons about responsibility. Stories began portraying children as thinkers and observers, capable of understanding complex worlds rather than simply obeying them. This subtle change influenced how adults perceive youthful voices. Meanwhile, law crept into daily life, setting age limits, work restrictions, and educational requirements that redefined childhood in official terms. These laws were imperfect and unevenly enforced, yet they marked a turning point, showing that society accepted responsibility beyond the family. Change arrived gradually, carried by paperwork rather than parades. Urban life continued shaping young experiences, though streets grew slightly safer as lighting improved and regulations reduced hazards. Children learned to navigate crowds with growing confidence, balancing independence with newly defined boundaries. The city remained demanding, but it softened around its edges. Health reforms improved sanitation and reduced disease, altering childhood survival in ways families noticed quickly. Longer lives encouraged deeper investment in education and well-being, reinforcing the idea that childhood preparation mattered. The connection between care and progress became harder to ignore. Social class still mattered enormously, but cracks appeared as education allowed rare movement between layers of society. Exceptional students challenged assumptions, proving ability did not belong exclusively to wealth. These stories inspired hope without erasing inequality. Discipline evolved as understanding grew, shifting slowly from punishment toward guidance, though old habits remained stubborn. Adults debated how much structure was necessary to build character without breaking spirit. the balance stayed fragile and unresolved. As generations changed, memory played a role, with adults recalling their own strict upbringings when shaping rules for children. Some repeated the past, while others deliberately softened it, guided by experience rather than theory. By this stage of the journey, Victorian childhood appeared transitional, standing between restraint and reform, tradition and transformation. The systems surrounding young lives had begun adjusting, even if daily realities lagged behind ideals. Momentum gathered quietly rather than dramatically. The storyteller senses that childhood had become visible as a subject worth protecting, studying, and debating. These conversations did not end the age, but they reshaped its direction. And as the era continued unfolding, those early shifts would ripple outward, carrying childhood toward a future that still felt uncertain, yet noticeably different.